I know you're asking. Hello and welcome to another episode of Ask a Seminarian. So today's question is, what is faith? And I can promise you it is more than just a George Michael song. All right, anyway, so what is faith? Well, faith is actually one of the three theological virtues. So before we start talking about faith, actually, let's take a step back and talk about, well, what is virtue? So virtue comes all the way from Aristotle, and he was really big on what he called virtue ethics. And he said that living a moral and upright life meant behaving in a way consistent with a virtuous person. And so there are a number of different virtues that Aristotle held to high regard, and so it was exemplifying the characteristics of justice, prudence, temperance, patience, kindness, all of those types of things. And so kind of a Merriam-Webster definition of virtue would be a trait that exhibits moral excellence. You can think of it kind of more of a theological framework of it was a gift from God that allows us to grow in deeper relationship with Him by becoming more sanctified or holy. And so really an interesting thing about virtues is it's not just, I have this virtue and now I'm good to go, but they're things that require practice, and it's through habit that we grow in virtue. So practicing patience allows us to become more patient and thereby be a more virtuous person, exhibiting more patience, as Aristotle would say. And so the church recognizes, as I mentioned, three theological virtues, so faith, hope, and love. And then there are four cardinal virtues. And so cardinal comes from the Latin word cardo, which means hinge. And really this is kind of the basis of good, upright living you could think of. And the four cardinal virtues are prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude. All right. So those are kind of super ultra brief background around virtues, but let's talk about faith. So one of the thoughts, and C.S. Lewis brings this up when he was initially talking about Christianity and belief, is why in the world is faith even a virtue? It's not virtuous to believe something because it's true. Like, for example, is it virtuous to believe 1 + 1 = 2? Well, no, I'm not a morally upright or a good person for believing 1 + 1 = 2. Like, if something is true and believing it, that just makes you, a reasonable, rational human being. And so his thought was, well, if God exists and you believe that He exists, you have faith in Him, then why is that virtuous? But then C.S. Lewis explores that further and realizes as a Christian, that is incredibly virtuous, because faith, and any time that you hear in the Bible about belief and faith, it isn't just mere psychological assent. Although, there is something to it with not being able to visibly see God or touch, taste, smell, perceive Him from our senses all the time. Having a solid belief and psychological assent is good and important. But what makes it virtuous is the fact that belief in God calls you to something deeper. It calls you to live a transformed life. Faith isn't just mere psychological assent. I believe in God and now I can behave and do all these unvirtuous things. It means exemplifying all of the virtues and behaving in a way that lives into how God wants us to behave and to live into that relationship with God. So anytime you hear belief, it isn't just, I believe and now I can do whatever, but belief calls us into action. And so that's where faith is a virtue, because it's the knowledge of God being real and existing, and then having that knowledge call us into a deeper reality of how we should be living a virtuous life. And so really, that's what faith is that trust. It's that knowledge and understanding of God's existence and trusting Him to live in such a way that is according to His will and according to, even if it is difficult for us, but to live according to how He wants us to live. And so in the most simple way I could think of, faith boils down in one sentence definition is trust. And that's why I actually kind of really like faith in terms of the theological virtues. I really, really like faith. I would say almost the best, but I kind of see it as the foundation for the other two. So faith is trust in God, trust in His promises, trust that there is something more and that He has a purpose for all of us. And now hope extends on that. And hope, you can think, is that trust and believing God's promises extended into the future. Now, hope isn't mere wishful thinking or, oh, I hope that it's going to be good weather today. But it calls us into action and believes that trust that we have in God extends into the future and that he has something better planned for us. And it's only through hope that we're able to have the third virtue of love. Because we believe that there's something more, because that there's reason and purpose and something for us in the future that allows us to live with love in the present and to love those outside of ourselves. So I see kind of faith as the foundation which leads to hope, which leads to love. And so you need that to exemplify and to live into who God has always called us to be. So faith, hope, and love. Now, one really important thing to remember for faith is not subservient to reason. So faith doesn't come before reason, but faith follows from reason. So one thing that I've heard people who maybe aren't believers would say, you religious people, you believe something, you have faith, you believe that, which means you believe something without having any evidence for it. Well, that's not the case at all. Faith extends and goes beyond what we have reason and evidence for. So it's not subservient to reason, but goes beyond it. And a really great example of this is dating and marriage. So you could think dating is like reason. So you're with this person, and like when I was dating my wife, I found her attractive, and she challenged me, and we had, very intellectual, stimulating conversations, and I just loved being with her. And through all these reasons and all these things that I knew about her were based on reason. But getting married was a leap of faith. No matter how well I knew her or I thought I knew her, it's a leap of faith to go into marriage and commit your life to that person. And so it would be crazy to marry someone without having any of that background and information and knowledge about who they were and how you were together as a couple. But it's not, so you don't get married without having that, but it's because you have those things, but it's still a leap beyond that allows you to take that commitment to be faithful in marriage and take that leap into marriage and into faith. And so that's really what faith is. It goes beyond reason. And we do this all the time as human beings. I have no idea how electricity and circuitry works, but I have faith when I flip on the switch, a light bulb is going to turn on. I have faith that when I take medicine, it's going to do what I expect it to do. I have faith that there's a reality beyond our senses, beyond just all of the information and facts that we perceive, but there's something beyond those things. Now, everything that we put together, how we have, even just understanding that we have a world that we can make sense of with our senses, and our brains aren't just random atoms bouncing around in our skulls, but there is, purpose behind that. There is a hand behind that allows us to make sense of all of those things. So it's not just chaotic atoms bouncing around, randomly put together, but there is a logos behind all of this that allows us to make sense of the world, and allows us to make sense of even listening to this podcast. There's something behind that. Anytime that you talk about love, there's faith involved. There's all the evidence from my wife and kids that they, love me, about, wanting to spend time or doing this, that, or the other thing with me. But love itself, belief that, I'm loved, is an act of faith. You take all of those reasons there, but it's still a faith. There's nothing that can definitively prove that beyond all of the evidence, but it's because of the evidence that I take this leap of faith and put my life into their hands. That's really what faith is. It's trust. It's taking that step beyond reason to know that there is something more than what we can just see, touch, feel, and taste. All right. So I want to end with a story that I think really exemplifies what faith is. And so this goes back to the 1800s with a couple named Horatio and Anna Spafford. So Horatio was a really well-to-do, wealthy lawyer, and they had recently just bought up a bunch of real estate in Chicago in the 1800s. Now, unfortunately, in the Great Chicago Fire of 1871, which burned down a significant part of the city, they lost a massive amount of their investments, which was a huge blow financially and for their family and all of that. and I'm sure was a really hard pill to swallow, but he was really involved with the Presbyterian Church and did a lot to help rebuild the community and to help lift others up who were really struggling, and was involved and had a great relationship with the preacher D.L. Moody. And so through that, held on to his faith and belief in Christ, and that compelled him into action to helping others. Now, it was about 2 years after that, him and his family, so Horatio, Anna, and their 4 daughters were going to take a trip to England because their friend, the preacher D.L. Moody was over in England. They're going to go over there, work with him, talk with him, and do some work in England. Well, Horatio got delayed because of work that was going on. And so he sent Anna and his 4 daughters ahead of them. And on their transatlantic ride to England, there was an accident where their boat collided with another boat, and over 200 people died, including all Horatio's 4 daughters. Now, Anna survived, and when she made it to England, she wrote a note back and said, which included the words, "Saved alone." Now, I can't imagine Horatio receiving that note and the news that the boat had an accident and his 4 daughters were dead. But as quickly as he could, he packed up and left to meet his wife, Anna, in England. And on the way there, the captain told Horatio, as they had reached the spot, this is the place where the accident happened and his daughter just died. Now, Horatio went below deck and composed the hymn, "It is well with my soul." Now, I can't imagine the pain and the anguish and the agony that Horatio must have felt staring at those vast ocean waters, knowing that he would never see his daughters again through that accident. But the words to the hymn, "It is well with my soul," speak volumes to the faith that he had. And so here's the first verse. "When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul." It is only through that faith and that trust that we have in God, that through whatever tragedy or accident comes our way, that we can have faith in God and his purposes in our life. And Anna was recorded saying by a pastor who was helping out with the survivors, "God gave me 4 daughters. Now they have been taken from me. Someday I will understand why. Someday she can live in that faith to understand and know someday she will be reunited with them in heaven with God." That's what faith looks like. All right. Well, from all of us here at Ask a Seminary podcast and from SUMC, thank you so much for listening, and God bless.